Hello, everybody. I'm just having a look at my pictures here, so I'm not actually looking at people. So my name's Meg Smith, and I'm basically a psychologist who decided, in addition to learning how to write research reports and theses and lectures, look, I need another skill here. I need to actually learn how to get concepts across. So I'm hoping this is an interactive session, actually. So please interrupt, say things if you'd like to. Sorry, guys, I'm just having a little bit of.
All good.
Okay, right, there we are. I can see you now.
Did you want to share your screen again?
Is it sharing now?
It might be the feedback.
I'll leave that meeting. Okay, so we're on the screen. So can you see my screen now?
Not at the moment, no. If you go down to share screen again, you should be able to select your screen.
Okay. Right. Sorry about this.
All good.
It's okay. Really?
Oh, okay. I think we've
all good.
Share screen. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Got it. Okay. Beautiful.
Righto, people. So here we go. We'll just go back again. Hello, Olivia. Okay, so Olivia, Rashani and I were basically talking about how to translate images from words into actually pictures. So we're just going to go through some of the basic things of how you actually get to draw. Well, the first thing, of course, is look, you can pitch somebody else's. So, okay, the wolf and the sheep is classic one. So you can sort of start doodling. Most of the cartooning I learned was in actually really boring meetings where I started to look at, what does this government document actually say? I'll just scribble in the margins and doodle. So doodling is the way political cartoonists actually start. One of the other things about pictures is they survive political suppression. So particularly Chinese cartoonists and some American cartoonists, you can actually say quite a lot in a picture, but people won't actually pick up the satire. So the issue with a picture is that people will often, a picture will survive, whereas the words may not. Some of my friends got into cartooning. My friend Melinda Epstein, who's a psychiatric survivor, has done a lot of illustrations and basically reframing. So instead of a list of medication, she puts down a job, getting housing and things like that. And of course, the image of raising the flag at Iwo Jima is a fairly well-known one. So you can pinch other people's ideas or use those as a base and then sort of insert your own words. One of my favourite cartoonists is Hilary Price, who's a cartoonist in San Francisco, and she actually she has a column. And the problem I think that a lot of cartoonists have is that conservative newspapers won't actually print political cartoons. If it's an editorial cartoon, it probably has to comply with, the editorial philosophy, which in lots of cases can be really conservative. But Hilary has managed to, she's got a sort of regular daily strip, and most of her stuff is about home life and cats and dogs and things like that. But every now and then she manages to squeeze in a little bit of, political comment. Now, my favourite cartoonist is Simon Kneebone, who actually has a company now that he actually will go out and, do illustrations. But he's been doing cartoons since the sort of mid-70s, actually, started illustrating, not-for-profit organisations' newsletters. And he's actually very, very good at conceptualising an abstract concept and translating it into a visual image. So his work is really worth looking at, and his style is also kind of pretty easy to practice with, actually. And I guess one of the things is, look, you know, we're not all great artists, but everybody can draw. The quick trick is to find something that you can actually draw, and that might mean, you know, copying and practicing somebody else's style. The illustration on the left is from Shrink Wrap Press, and Shrink Wrap Press started up by a couple of psychiatrists. And Neil Phillips is the artist here. And this actually comes from a book called Lost in a Minefield. And it's actually a really good way of depicting you know, what psychosis feels like, what it looks like, and the types of images that come up. So Neil Phillips is another one of my heroes in the art and illustration field. Mark Knight is another one who does some really good stuff on social commentary in Australia. So again, it's an image, you know, that, you know, a government report is no substitute for real shelter after a disaster. And of course, in recent times, we've had lots and lots and lots and lots of ones about COVID and particularly President Trump. So the Grim Reaper image, you know, can stand for a lot of things. You know, in this case, it's political death, you know. So Trump has, you know, provided a wealth of kind of images for social cartooning. Ron Cobb was one of the early political cartoonists that I came across in the 1970s when I was struggling to do my job as a health educator. And Ron is actually a very good artist, so I couldn't actually reproduce his work, but I really like the images that he came up with, you know, the whole idea of, you know, social machines and the underground comic movement. And in the 1970s, I got into the kind of, you know, hippie underground comic scene. I don't know whether people know about underground comics, but in America, they had the comics code that, you know, comics should only depict, you know, family and heterosexuals and things like that. And there was a whole wave of comics that were produced tackling social issues, social change, and different things like that. So Ron was part of that movement. This is Time's latest cover, which is, I think, is a beautiful way of, you know, summing up that, you know, here we've got Trump walking out the door. So one of the issues about a cartoon is that it really needs to be instant. Looking at the image, looking at the word, and it all goes together and you get it in a second. And I guess that's one of the things that there's a conflict with a lot of cartoonists, that you might be a fantastic artist, but if it's so complicated that you can't get the picture, it's not actually, you know, kind of going to work. This is another one of my favourite cartoonists, Mohammed Rashid, who does a lot of cartoons, mainly in the Indian area. And one of his comments is that you really need to have, so he does a lot of, you know, political reading, and here he is, you know, sort of, how do you translate the political concepts and the social commentary into images that, you know, instantly say something to someone. The other thing is using images from very well-known characters. So here's someone from Sesame Street giving Trump a punch. Again, you know, it's a beautiful piece of artwork, but again, a very, very simple concept to get across. A bit about the psychology of drawing. One of the things that intrigues me is the whole issue of drawing on the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. Now, kids are good at drawing because the left side of the brain hasn't yet kind of taken dominance. So one of the issues about schizophrenia and psychosis is that the right side of the brain becomes more dominant, and the left side of the brain is pretty much overwhelmed. So trying to figure out what's rational and reasonable becomes much more difficult. So being able to draw is a little bit like having dreams, getting the right side of the brain to actually work. And Betty Edwards has written on how to draw on the right side of the brain, which is basically how to shut off the logical thinking part of your brain. So, you know, you're drawing something and most of us have learned to correct, that's not right, I should do this differently, it should look like that, etc., etc. That's the other side of your brain talking. So one of the things that Neil Phillips is talking about here is, you know, he's kind of musing about the images, which are sort of akin to the kind of, you know, the daydreaming thoughts or the kind of images and thinking you get in schizophrenia. So, you know, and there is, of course, some evidence that people who are artistic, you know, are much more able to dissociate and be creative because they're not suppressing the rational thinking all the time. So, this is Neil Phillips, surrounded by his kind of images and things like that. And another cartoonist I really like is Judy Horacek, who does a lot of drawing in Victoria, and she has a fairly simple style, but again, is able to get the concepts across in a very, very simple kind of way. This is an Indian cartoonist, and I really like his work. So, and of course, you know, with COVID, we've had lots and lots of representations of COVID. Illustrators were fairly quick to sort of pick up, you know, how do you turn the COVID bug into a person or an entity that actually says something. Dr. Seuss, I don't know whether people grew up on Dr. Seuss, the Cat in the Hat, and what have you. But I didn't realise until, you know, some time ago that Dr. Seuss actually had worked actually as a political illustrator and a cartoonist. And of course, some of his books, you know, are quite political. So, and certainly one of the issues with children's books is that kids are very good at picking up on images. So illustrating books, information, leaflets, etc. for young people works very, very well to get the concepts across. Now, you don't actually need to be able to draw to become a cartoonist, and my favourite cartoonist is Kathy Wilcox, who's an Australian cartoonist, and when she first applied for a job with the Sydney Morning Herald, they say, yeah, well, we like your political ideas, we really like what you're drawing, but you actually need to learn how to draw properly. I thought, oh, okay, so she's become a cartoonist, but you know, she actually had to learn how to draw. So her style is very, very simple. And that's one of the things that if you can actually, you know, figure out, okay, you know, what do I need to get across? What are the kind of images I need to get across? So, and this is me down the bottom, you know, like, hey, look, you can either use stock images, you know, that you can sort of download from the internet, of course. Or look, you know, we all learned how to sort of write the alphabet. We can very easily play into, hey, you know, let's get a bit further and, you know, start drawing faces and images and things like that. So some cartoons are very wordy. Yeah, the one on the right is a nice cartoon, but it's kind of got a lot of images and a lot of words, which is kind of good if it was in a magazine and, you know, people were thoughtfully looking at it and sort of thinking it through. So, so one of the issues, I guess, is looking at your target audience, you know, who's going to be reading this and how much time will they think about it? The one on the right here, So Young Man, What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up Alive, is actually based on a fairly famous cartoon, you know, where, you know, officer is doing community policing and is talking to a little kid in, you know, the milk bar saying, hey, son, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's, you know, sort of white police officer talking to a little white kid of, you know, how to sort of aspire and what have you. And of course, this is a black kid and, you know, with the sort of Black Deaths, it's like, well, look, you know, I'm just hoping to grow up alive here. So taking a concept that's already been used before and just changing the words. And of course, lights, camera, action, you know, just changing one word makes this a pretty sort of interesting cartoon. I'm a fan of the New Yorker, and the New Yorker cartoons have captions. And so I'm not a fan of cartoons with captions, but some people like them. They're sort of great fun. So, you know, while we're doing this, think up a caption for this one. It's clearly COVID because they've both got masks on. But look, you know, what could the caption actually be? The caption stuff is an interesting one when you get into looking at sort of topical events. You know, it's great in lectures. You know, you can put up an image on your lecture screen and, you know, okay, guys, think of a caption. Where are you going to put your work? Street art is a great way of getting across. And I particularly like the sort of COVID one at the top here of, you know, the two bins giving each other a bit of a cuddle. So again, it's very simple, but it's, you know, pretty effective with just a few lines. And one of the issues about street art is that, you know, you don't have to get permission from anybody. You can do things in the middle of the night and things like that. And this is a nice one, you know, well, okay, nice little COVID message here. Okay, this is an Australian image, of course. I don't know what critters you've got in other countries in terms of how many critters apart do you need to be to stay safe from COVID? But this is one that, you know, really kind of took on in Australia. And the three monkeys, you know, hear no, see no, speak no, you know, whatever the image is, you know, the sort of the three monkeys is actually a really good base for getting. And the last one, this one I really like. I think this has to be the best one I've seen. You know, when COVID got Trump, I mean, Trump got COVID, or COVID got Trump, yeah. I can't believe we made it to the highest office in the land. So it's a play on words, but, you know, I just like the little COVID things there. Okay, guys, enough of the PowerPoints. Now, I'd like to hear from you. What do any of you do cartooning? Do any of you do illustrations?
I wish I did.
What would you like to illustrate? What do you wish you could illustrate?
I definitely, I guess I am really interested in kind of using art to depict anything political. So, you know, all of those examples that you kind of went through, in particular, the ones that are really simple but effective. I really like being able to use art to express things. And as, you know, your title says, it does express more than kind of words can. I wanted to ask a question in relation to, I know that you at the start of the presentation was speaking about how particular columns or particular media outlets or newspapers won't take political artists who may be too political. They're quite conservative in terms of what they take and what they allow in print. Why do you think that is, or is that, you know, each kind of newspaper decides that on their own, or is it more just a overarching thing that you know, print doesn't really want anything too political?
Well, I guess in Australia we've got, you know, the Murdoch press who are really conservative. So, and a lot of my cartoonist friends have said, you know, they found it really difficult to get work in terms of a lot of the people I know, you know, managed to scrape a living by doing cartoons for, you know, non-government organisation newsletters. And the internet, of course, has provided a great way to sort of share ideas around, but it's pretty hard making a living as a cartoonist. So this is why I'm thinking that if, you know, we have health workers and community activists who can also sort of express their concepts in an illustrated way, you know, we can actually kind of sneak the pictures in. As I said, I first started doing it because I was working as a health educator. And then, you know, started branching out. But in the 70s, when I started working, there was a real issue about political statements being made. So there were a lot of radical action newspapers and newsletters that got going. I was involved in a mental health support group, and we started putting out our newsletter because we wanted to get across information that we weren't able to get from, you know, the sort of the health professions. So we started publishing our own newsletter, and cartoons were a really important part of that, actually, in terms of getting across information about, you know, drug side effects and where you could get help, and, you know, images of people's own personal journey. So, and when I did my PhD, it was actually on the social and psychological effects of living with bipolar disorder. And of course, you know, I started off interviewing people, doing the kind of structured interview sort of stuff. And a lot of people weren't interested in filling that out, you know. They would ring me and we'd have long phone conversations, and I'm frantically taking notes. But people started writing poetry and also doing pictures. So I thought, well, okay, this is the way people want to express themselves, that, you know, they're not used to being interviewed, but they are used to, you know, writing their own story, or so getting creative. So as well as writing my PhD thesis, I also ended up editing a whole lot of the material into a collection of people's experiences. You know, some of which were graphics, some of which were poetry, and some of which were, you know, just interesting ways to depict, you know, what they'd actually gone through. And I think that's been one of the key strengths of community psychology, that we have actually looked at the, hey, look, you know, we're not interviewing laboratory subjects, we're interviewing, or, you know, getting information from people who live in a whole different visual and verbal and non-verbal world to ourselves. How do we get that information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Different ways of kind of deriving that information, or those lived experiences.
Yeah. One of the striking things I found when I was working as a counsellor was that you could do the kind of drawing with kids. You could get kids to do the kind of, you know, draw a picture of your family, draw a picture of what it's like at school, and kids do it. You know, they're very happy to do it. But then when you get to adults, they say, I can't draw. And you know, Betty Edwards, in her book on, you know, drawing on the right side of the brain, you know, made the point that we're using that part of the brain that sees the visual images from a fairly early age. You know, we're taught to sort of write the alphabet. I mean, I don't know how many hours you spent practicing how to write properly, but we didn't get that kind of practice in, you know, how to sort of draw what you see. So it's a potential we all have, but we actually stop using it. And you know, if well, this is a little exercise we can all do now. If you think you can't draw, if you start scribbling something now, you'll probably find that you know, it's kind of like what you got up to when you were about 12 years old. That you know, by about 12 to 15, the drawing potential has been sort of stopped. You know, we haven't learned how to sort of do it. And I think one of the hardest things I found after I finished my PhD was how to unlearn the PhD writing. Sorry about all of those of you who are doing a PhD, but but we learn to express ourselves in certain ways, and that's actually counterproductive to expressing yourself in other different kind of ways. So, yeah. So, you know, one of the post PhD therapy exercises, take up drawing. Okay, has anyone got access to paper and pencil where they are?
I'll go and get some.
Yes, 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 yes. So we can sort of start off with something pretty simple here, like, you know, just here's a squiggle. You know, and in the squiggle you can see that there are faces and hands, but you know, it's actually a fairly simple squiggle, but it works. I'm just screaming down the thing here. Is that you, Isaac? No. Would anyone else like on the phone? Stop share. Now I can see people.
There we go. Yeah, we do have a comment here from Cara agreeing with unlearning academic language. And yeah, I guess for me as a PhD student myself, it's kind of hard to attach yourself to writing very, you know, complexly in that particular way. And then knowing the journey now after that, it's unlearning that and being able to write in a way that people are going to understand. And we were speaking before, Meg, where, you know, some people do have an issue with writing so, I guess, big and large and in complex ways, because it kind of does sometimes gatekeep other people from understanding what you're writing about. So yeah, it is a process, and I guess it's the unlearning afterwards that it's going to be quite challenging.
Yeah, I guess, and for me, I mean, you know, my health education role went from women's health, you know, well women, to mental health. And I guess one of the things I had to learn pretty fast was that, you know, the community you're working with adult women who are well, they're wanting information about, you know, just normal bodily sort of stuff. They're educated, they're able to read medical information, they're able to comprehend medical information. So yeah, so in some ways, you know, my psychology training was okay. I could sort of write stuff about what a vaginal infection is and here's medication for it and stuff like that. And it's like I was communicating to my, you know, colleagues, you know, in the university kind of setting. But then I got to working in mental health, where people really have that level of educational understanding. They may have come from a background where English wasn't their first language. And the whole concept of, it's all very well to sort of show something physical, like here is a spot on your arm, you know, this is the cream that you put on the spot on your arm. But how do you depict an emotional state and not sleeping, and, you know, how this medication might help you to sleep, and, you know, getting into brain function and things like that. So, so some of the most successful comics have really sort of been aimed at young people, and streetwise comics, I don't know whether this is coming through the right way, folks. This was a project in the 70s and the 80s in Australia, where, you know, somebody made the bright observation that kids read comics, right? They're reading Superman and Marvel comics and, you know, whatever. So how do we get this across to young people? And this one's about depression and, you know, relationship breakups and things like that. And I guess I worked on a comic about, you know, suicide and mental illness and depression for young people. And as health professionals, we were hopeless at coming up with the concepts. You know, we all knew that, you know, you needed to depict, you know, this, that, and the other. But we came up with 5 stories, which by the time you finish reading them, if you weren't suicidal to start with, you'd be bloody suicidal by the end of it. So, so we then had to decide, well, what is it? What is the element in a comic that kids go for? And it's the positive thing, you know, it's Superman, you know, beating the baddies. It's the Phantom, you know, kind of, you know, supporting his local community, whatever. So we actually had to have some, you know, positive role models, and also latching into people's inner strengths. So, you know, doing little role plays in there of, well, yeah, you know, you're pretty depressed because your brother got killed in a motorbike crash, but you do have inner strength. Yes, it's okay to feel sad. Yes, you can talk to people about it. But basically you can, you know, you can kind of get your own supports together and choose how you're actually going to get through this particularly tough time. So, and that I think is again why it's important to have some concept of, if you're illustrating, what do you want the desired effect to be? You know, do you want people to feel terribly depressed afterwards? Oh my God, the world's terrible and awful. Or do you want, you know, the hero to come to the rescue, or to, you know, get in there about the fantasy and things like that. Wafa, have you got any comments? Just that Wafa works with the Muslim community. We were talking about images the other day, so.
I remember many years ago, my husband had done a project, something for uni, before I'd met him anyway, but he was looking at the concept of metaphor, and how I think he looked at news stories around, I can't remember now, but it was something to do with possibly the Iranian Revolution in Australian media.
Yeah.
And so there were news stories in, I don't know which newspapers, I can't speak for him. But anyway, what's been left in my memory is that, that these articles, the metaphor in this article was that it was a pot of water on the stove, and it had a lid on it. And so as you turned the heat on, it started to simmer and simmer and simmer, and eventually it explodes. And it's that sort of image of, and as you know, it's a visual image. It's in writing, but it's a very visual image. And you know, he had enough articles to be able to prove that that was that was indeed a factor. Like that was actually a theme. That was actually a metaphor. So I always interested in the idea of art and images and how well they speak. But I was particularly impressed with just how simple some of those, the cartoons that you just showed.
Yes.
How simple, and how very few words needed to be said, but they were just so spot on, and they speak to something, you know, within a person. And most people can understand it without language, so to speak, or even if you had a little bit of language, you know, to understand the few words that are there. But it's quite fascinating that there's something quite intrinsic in how those things get communicated. But I'm always in awe of the wit and the intellect that goes. I mean, I know we're talking about right brain stuff as though it's devoid of the analytical somehow, but it's not really. I mean, I hear you talking about the left and right brain, but what I'm seeing is it's an analysis that gets made somewhere in the mind that is just so simple and it goes back to basics, and then it gets communicated. So it's almost like it goes down to, I mean, anybody who's done any writing will know that, you know, when you're trying to communicate your message, you need to get back to the, what is it that I want to say? What exactly is it that I want to say? Make it simple. And then from there, go ahead if you can write it. And it's almost like that process, that intellectual process is done somewhere in the brain. And then it comes out through the right brain and it gets, you know, beautifully presented. But anyway, that's just my commentary, my reflection. But thank you for sharing. It's been amazing.
Yeah, the Iranian Revolution was fascinating. And I remember, you know, when they kicked out the BBC journalists and, you know, the kind of, you know, the sort of chief honchos are saying, well, we've got to kick the journalists out. So, you know, they can't sort of keep reporting this. And there's a whole crowd of people holding up, you know, their iPhones and their iPads and their computers and, you know, every electronic gadget, you know, beaming everything to the rest of the world and the commenters, but they were all journalists, you know. So, you know, another image that's a fairly good one is, you know, the Japanese tsunami wave, you know, that sort of beautiful wave. I forget who the Japanese artist was, but anyway, it's kind of like a classic image. But that's been used a lot of times, like, you know, the wave of plastic bags, lots and lots of plastic bags, you know, coming off the wave. Unemployment, you know, lots and lots of unemployment. And there was one of Trump, you know, with the tsunami of votes, you know, so there's being overwhelmed by, you know, kind of votes for the Democrats. So, and that's a nice one to use because you can kind of like just take the wave and then just, you know, write in over the top, you know, what it is that's swamping whoever's, you know, going to get swamped by it sitting on the beach and things like that.
Meg, just a question.
Yeah.
It seems that as you were talking, you know, the image of the wave or the image of the three monkeys or the superhero image, that there seems to be almost in order to, there seems to be, oh, I don't know what you call that, a set of things that people can immediately draw on if they want to communicate through cartooning. Like there is a certain set of images or themes or well-known cultural
yeah, and
I'm not explaining myself very well, but
yeah, and they do have to be culture specific. I mean, I was looking at some Indian cartoons. Well,
yeah,
one I showed you of which kind of makes sense if you're Indian, but because I'm not in India, it's like took me a little bit of while to sort of kind of get the meaning of, you know, what the cartoon was about. And I've got a book of Chinese dissident cartoons, but they're all in Chinese. And some of them are fairly clear, you know, like there's a wonderful one of, you know, a cartoonist, you know, trying to draw a sort of raging tiger. And there's a, you know, fat tabby cat, you know, just that's his model. And it's, you know, I mean, the image is obviously, you know, well, you know, I want you to draw me a picture of, you know, what a powerful tiger I am. That's probably what, you know, his boss is telling him. But the only model he's got is that of a fat, lazy cat, you know, like the fat cats of bureaucracy. So even without any kind of captions, you know, I can kind of get the image actually. So there were kind of cultural things you can actually link into. Some of the recent ones that came out for the bushfires, you know, are picking up on poems like Dorothy McKellar, I love a sunlit country, a land of sweeping plains. And that's been used a few times now by cartoonists who say, you know, I love a sunburnt country, you know, turning to ashes and, you know, just kind of changing the words around. So, and images of, you know, the kind of the kangaroo and the emu, which are the, you know, the symbols of Australia, you know, being very fat or being burnt to a crisp or whatever. So it doesn't take much, as you say. And I guess the challenge for me has been, well, yes, I can see that image and I'd really like to create it, but I don't actually have the technical skills to do it. So this is where you pinch other people's drawing skills, if you like, or I mean, the cartoons I do are basically sort of talking head type cartoons. And they're the ones that Kathy Wilcox does too, you know, like I can draw a face, I can draw a pointed finger, I can draw a kind of, you know, expression. So, and that's a fairly simple one, you know, like, so Trump's going to win the election. Oh no, you know, so, you know, that's a fairly simple one to do. But some of the really great cartoons, of course, you know, are done by really good illustrated artists. And, you know, if you look back in history, particularly in the Middle East and India and China, and also Europe, let's not forget Europe, you know, going back sort of centuries, there's been some great political cartoons. Japan, you know, a lot of the Japanese woodcuts, you know, they're making political statements. And the delight I get in that is that often the statement is so subtle that the statement, the person who's, you know, being aimed at probably doesn't get the significance. And I don't remember whether people remember when Trump was named Time Person of the Year. And I thought, oh no, how could they do this? But the Time Person of the Year picture, it wasn't a picture of Trump, it was a picture of a faded old French imperial armchair. You know, the fat aristocrat who's never had to work for anything, corrupt, lazy, you know, populist, you know, ruthless, blah, blah, blah. Somehow all of these images were in the chair. And I thought, well, okay, so, you know, you couldn't actually sue. Trump couldn't sue them about this is a terrible image, you know, you've got to me. But all of the things about the chair said it, you know, you didn't actually. And I'm sure, I don't think Trump ever got the message that that's what it was about, you know, that these were the characteristics of him that had made him Time Person of the Year, you know, corrupt, lazy, you know, narcissistic, whatever. Now, did anyone get a pen and pencil and have you scribbled anything? Cara, I can see you nodding there.
I've restarted it. Yeah, I started a bit later than others. I don't know if anyone else wants to go. Charlie.
Never mind, we won't put the hard word on you. Now, you see, this is like trying to teach people research methods. People immediately get panic stricken. Oh, I can't draw. Oh, I can't do research methods. I'll do psychology, but I can't do statistics. What are we being told about our innate creativity? Oh, fabulous.
I'm drawing double donuts, and I'm trying to have two donuts have a conversation with themselves saying something like, do you think we should go to different, something just sort of talking about how we're celebrating double donuts, eating 13 days of donuts, and yet people overseas can't even, you know, eat, or let alone they're dying of COVID. So I think we're just very insular with our whole COVID battle. We're not really.
Oh.
So the donut's sort of saying, like, I don't know what the one, I'm not sure what the conversation is, but one donut maybe going like another day of double donuts, yay, and other ones like, do you reckon it's time we went to, I don't know, Bali or something now, you know? I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but yeah.
Can we go out now and have a coffee shop and eat with all the other donuts? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's a work in progress.
Yeah, one of the things I was interested in doing, community psychology in Australia. We've got a Facebook page. I think I learnt about it about a year ago, and I thought, oh look, it'd be really good. And what I'd really like to see is a kind of pool of pro bono cartoons and illustrations, because look, I know when I was working as a health educator, you know, I was always scrapping, and we used to have an archive. Like every time I saw a graphic, you know, in the newspaper, well, we don't have newspapers anymore, but anyway. Although I've been scanning the internet and I've now got a kind of, you know, archive of images and what have you. But to be able to have, you know, a kind of store of images that you can actually feed, you know, look at. And there was a favourite one I found, which was, you know, a huge fish finger and little men in a boat. And, you know, the caption is, watch out, man, it's Moby Fish Finger. And I thought, that's such a wonderful cartoon, but look, you know, I can't really see how I could use it in. Maybe if it was a pamphlet on losing weight and obesity, like, or something, I don't know. But yeah, I think, you know, kind of trawling through. And look, you know, I got most of these images off the internet. So it's pretty easy to type into Google cartoon, social cartoon, political cartoon, and get some great ideas. And I have an iPad, so I can actually draw on it. Well, I could if it was turned on, yes. So one of the things I'm wanting to do is to just kind of, you know, create cartoons and kind of get them out there. And if people can use them, fine, you know, but at least to kind of get some images going. Because I guess a really, really good cartoon or caricature is, it has to be really timely, and it's time limited. So, you know, just when you need to sort of get an image, you know, you've got to sort of think pretty fast and be able to create it fairly quickly. And one of my cartoonist friends who does, in fact, you know, do daily cartoons, saying, you know, you've just got to keep up so much with the politics and what's actually happening, and be able to produce something really quickly. We have an exhibition in Sydney, although it's probably not happening this year because of COVID, which is Behind the Lines, and it's an exhibition of political cartoonists, you know, the work of the year, you know, which are the best ones and things like that. And I think I've been going, I've actually bought the books actually, and one of the things that strikes me is they're so dated, they date so quickly because of course they're all about political things, you know, which, you know, kind of gone. So enduring cartoons are much harder to create. And you know, one of the things, well, you know, I mean, I think, you know, the kinds of things I had to learn as a cartoonist is, okay, you know, somebody holding up a protest sign, somebody writing letters and what have you, you know, the kind of stock images that we'd use for social change.
I wanted to ask, in terms of illustration style, because I know you spoke about, you know, you using your iPad to do your illustrations. So those would be digitally put together. And, you know, some other artists might do hand kind of drawn images. Do the different illustration styles speak to the different types of messages that are being conveyed? Do they have, I guess, any leverage in putting out different particular messages?
I think it depends on size. If you're doing cartoons for the print media, you've got to figure out, you know, how it'll look when it is reduced. So, for example, First Dog on the Moon, who's a cartoonist who does things for The Guardian, he's actually a journalist, and he says he can't draw, so he draws little dogs. He says he can't draw people, so he draws dogs and raccoons, like Raccoons of the Resistance is his latest one. And because he's a journalist, they're very wordy. They're like a sort of story. I mean, they're hilarious. You know, the little animals, you know, are kind of the talking head types of things. But one of the problems with his ones is that if you view them on an iPad or an iPhone, you actually can't read them. You actually need quite a large computer screen to be able to sort of read them. So that's one of the things, you know, you need to consider. And I know when I was working for the Mental Health Association, and we were starting to put up, you know, little sort of animated things on the screen, we didn't realise that most people didn't have access to sophisticated computers that were slow. You know, their computers were slow and they actually couldn't see the graphics. So you have to think about, you know, what's actually going to work. And when I actually saw the original drawings of you know, Behind the Lines exhibition, you know, they're artworks. You know, they're using paint and pencil and ink and charcoal and what have you. But you have to think in terms of, you know, what's going to reproduce. When I was doing my mental health newsletter ones, I was surreptitiously photocopying them on the photocopy at the university. I'm sure the university didn't realise why I was doing so much photocopying. So they had to be sort of, you know, black ink on white paper, so that they would actually photocopy. Kathy Wilcox, you know, hers is a pen, a fountain pen, you know, kind of, and, you know, kind of, you know, ink drawings, but she's never kind of gone beyond that. But she does quite small pictures, quite small cartoons for the Sydney Morning Herald. So they fit into a column. So in effect, what she's done is to say, well, okay, this is the space I've got. It has to fit in there, and it has to be something, yeah. Most of my cartoons, I mean, even though I've got an iPad, most of my cartoons are done on sort of blank A4 paper that, you know, I pinch from the photocopy machine, and biro. So all of those meetings, all of those endless faculty board meetings, all of those endless advisory committee meetings, I'm doodling away on the back of the sort of, you know, the agenda and things like that. So, so look, whatever works, works, you know, it's, you know, something that you feel comfortable with. So, yeah, so, you know, every time I go to Officeworks, I lustfully look at all the pens and think, look, you know, really what works for me is a black biro and, you know, a black felt tip pen and, you know, a box of photocopy paper. Yes, you know, I can. And frankly, you know, what I've found for my own thing is, although I can draw on the iPad, you know, it still feels not right actually. So what I still tend to do for any drawing I've got to do, I do it on the A4 paper, play around with it, and then take a photo of it and digitalise it that way. So, you know, it's a matter of figuring out what works for you.
There's a couple more minutes until this session ends. Does anybody have any other questions?
Meg, what would be your favourite all-time favourite cartoon?
My all-time favourite cartoon. Look, I think it was probably the Moby the Fish Finger one. It's I think it was the first one I got where that kind of concept of, you know, taking something innocuous like a fish finger, you know, like, you know, it's kind of dead fish. It's been totally oppressed. It's, you know, been mulched and, you know, made into something it's not meant to be. And here it is as, you know, this huge thing, you know, that's going to kind of swamp the wading boat. So I suppose the concept, yes, you could, I don't know how you could do it actually. You know, maybe all the oppressed of the world, you know, rise up and form into, you know, an armada or something. But there was just something about the metaphor about it, I suppose, you know, that something that we completely controlled, you know, is actually rising up and attacking us. So, yeah, the Banksy cartoons, the Banksy street artist, I really like those. And I remember Banksy talking about he's in fact, you know, a stunning artist, but found that, you know, if you're doing street art, you're going to get arrested if you take, you know, 10 hours to actually paint something. So he actually uses stencils. He creates the stencil in the studio and then, you know, whips out at night time and, you know, puts the stencil on the wall and paints over it, and then you've got the instant image. But it means he can kind of, you know, create it and sort of put it there. So, and there was another one, I think, I can't remember the artist's name actually. Anyway, in the New York subways, there were black squares of paper where, you know, the advertiser, you know, it was a free advertising space. So, you know, they just paste black paper over, indicating it was an advertising space and wait for an advertiser to come along and buy the space. And I think his name was Keith, but I can't think of the surname. Anyway, he started doing sort of white marker images on the black. So, and they were quite beautiful, but they were very, very simple. And again, you know, because it was in a public space, you had to do them fairly fast. So I guess the issue is, you know, what medium works for you, and, you know, is it time to, you know, start exploring other things? I mean, I've got lots of art equipment, but look, you know, frankly, you know, it's still the black felt pen and the white bond paper that, you know, I kind of relate to most of all.
if I could just comment on the Banksy stuff, unless other people have questions.
Go for it.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please do.
Okay, let's see if it'll work.
I can give you sharing rights. Does it work, or?
I'm going to try.
Oh, there we go. Beautiful.
Lovely. So this is, I think this is, oh, can I make that bigger? So this is, I think, why cartooning can be so incredible as well.
Oh, yes.
Banksy's work.
Palestinian wall, yeah.
And this is just, you put in Banksy Palestinian wall and you'll get all these incredible images of resistance and political comment, which is so so telling for places that are, you know, are voiceless.
Yes.
And, you know, people are voiceless and they need to be able to have an outlet. And on this wall, there are Palestinians who go out and add to this wall constantly, putting up pictures and messages of hope or resistance or you know, whatever message, and lots of messages of peace amongst all of that. You can see here. Yeah, so very, you know, very, very specific sort of images done by Banksy, but also local artists, you know, who go and join in this. And there was a, I remember, I'm just going to stop sharing, but I remember seeing I think it was a YouTube clip of a Palestinian who'd organised a Banksy street exhibition of art by Banksy, and it was a thank you to Banksy because of just how important the role of art and cartooning and those sorts of very almost mild-mannered, almost innocuous, but until you take another look, you know.
You take another look, yeah.
Yeah, and how meaningful and powerful that is. So, you know, those things are on YouTube. You can look them up yourself, but it can play a very, very important role in the lives of everyday people, particularly in situations where, you know, their rights are not met and and they're voiceless, and there's very few ways of being able to speak truth to power, if you like.
Yes.
Anyway, that's my 2 bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Our session is already wrapped up, but thank you so much, Meg. Such an insightful and interesting presentation, and thanks everyone for your contribution. I'll also just link in the chat the access to the documentary, the film documentary, In My Blood It Runs, just reminding you all that you have access to watching that. That link seems clickable, but it's not, but just copy and paste that and it should work.